G'day there. You're watching the Aussie BIM Guru, and today I've got a quick tutorial about Enscape. Now, most people that know me will know that this is one of my favourite plugins in AEC, in the industry, in particular for Revit, but of course it works in many other programs as well, like SketchUp and Rhino. In this case today I'm focusing on how you can add video textures and sounds to your model to add just a little bit more life to your experience. Now, I found this is a really great technique to really engage your client in the model when you're showing it to them. And I think it's a really easy little thing to do, but a lot of people don't know how to do it. So in this case, I'll show you how it works. In this case, I'm going to be using my basic sample project, which you can find on my website for free if you apply a promotional code, which you'll find in the description of the object. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I'm just in my basic sample project here, and I'm going to go to a view in 3D, and I'm just going to focus in on a TV in the model. And I'm going to make it so a video actually shows up on TV. Now in this case, when I do something like, say, a TV screen, I usually prefer to put something like a model in place or a small wall, or something that can host the material that I'm going to place on the surface, because I might have to need to adjust the positioning of the material a little bit. And if it's embedded inside a family, you can't really adjust it unless you're inside the family itself. So in this case, I'm going to use a model in place. I don't tend to use model in place, but I am just going to, in this specific case, some good rhyming. You probably want to call that something like a TV screen or something like that. And you can always host it to the element if you want, just to make things easier. In my case, I'm just going to pick the edge of the screen, and I'm just going to take note of the size. In this case, 866 by 478. So we will need to use those numbers a little bit, but in this case, I'm just going to make it very thin. And in this case, I'm going to apply a material to it. So in this case, I'll just apply it to the whole screen, but you may sometimes wish to paint this with a particular material by face. In fact, I might actually do that just to show you how. So in this case, I can paint. And I can actually paint using a material. So whilst I'm in this model in place, I'm going to go to its type properties. I'm going to make a new material, and I'll call this screen. And I'll make it instance based, and I'll make it a material parameter. And I'm going to paint the face of the screen, in this case, with that material. So I'm going to look for the parameter, so it should have bracket param after it, which lets you know it's a material parameter that just is unique to the family. And now the only surface in this whole shape that will show this is actually going to be that TV screen face now. That way we're not playing any more than we need to and putting any more computational pressure on the simulation than we need to. Okay, so let's go and build a texture with the video. So in this case, I'm just gonna nest a material, and I'm just going to make a new material, and you want to pick something that's pretty generic. So I'm just going to pick a default material, and I'll just use my standard prefix, and I'm just going to call this television 1. Now nothing really matters here except for one field in the material, which is the description. So in this case, there's a very particular syntax that you need to follow. So first of all, you're going to need to have your video saved somewhere. So in this case, I have my video saved at a particular path. I usually like to put it on some sort of server or drive. I find if it's on the desktop or somewhere like that, it doesn't always path to the material successfully. So in this case, I've put it on my D drive. I'm going to go square bracket, video, semicolon, paste, actually colon, I think that is. And I'm going to paste that path, then do a /, and I'm just going to copy and paste the full name of the video plus the file extension. Typically, I find that MP4 works best. I've tried WMV and it doesn't seem to work. So I do recommend using MP4. There are various websites that can convert videos between various formats if you need as well, or you can just use some sort of software. In this case, I'm just going to do a, whatever that is, the straight element. Not quite sure what they call that. Now, the next things you're going to specify are the X and the Y ratio. I find this can usually be a little bit experimental. It's quite hard to land on the right ratio. I haven't really found a true relationship between the video size and the size in the model. Typically what I do is I load in the texture to 1:1, so I'll go 1 square 1, and I'll actually on screen sort of eyeball the number of repetitions of the element across the texture that I can see, and then I'll usually multiply that ratio. So in this case, I know that it's going to be 3.5 by roughly 2. So in this case, I'll just do 3.5 by 2, and this is a scale factor, and also a rotation. So by default, a lot of videos will come in upside down from what I've found, depending on I assume that's based on the face's detection of where it thinks up is relative to the face. So in this case, I'm just going to tell it to rotate 180 degrees. Then I'm going to close it off with a square bracket, and this should be enough to call on that video. And we are also probably going to have to adjust the location of it. So I'm also going to go on the material and just add a model grid to it. So in this case, I'll just pick something quite small and square, like a 150 by 150. This is really just an element for Enscape, so it doesn't really matter if it has a surface pattern on it. You don't really have to worry too much about it looking too strange, because ideally you probably shouldn't be showing this anyway on a like a documentation view as it is. In this case, I can't see my surface pattern, which is interesting. There it is. Okay, now I can. And you should be able to pick it and move it from inside the family. Sorry, if you do it outside, you move the whole shape. If you do it inside, you'll be able to just adjust the location of the material, and this gives you an option to sort of nudge and move around the material, because it doesn't usually come in exactly where you need it to be. Now I'm going to boot up Enscape, and I might just make my screen a little bit smaller, and then I'll boot up Enscape on the side, and we'll just adjust the location of that material to suit. Now we haven't added sound yet. I'll show you how to do that after as well, but it's really easy. So I'm sort of saving that step till the end. So in this case, if we just zoom in here, we should be able to find that our video has loaded, which is great. So it's not quite positioned right, so we're just going to nudge this a little bit. It's vertically positioned quite well, but horizontally not quite. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to eyeball roughly how far off I think that might be. I think it's about a whole square off by the looks of it. And I'm just going to try that. So maybe a little bit too much. I've got a bit of bordering around the TV, so I'll just do maybe half of that. Still not quite right. So it's just a matter of finessing it until you get it roughly where you want it to sit. And that looks pretty good. So there's a little bit of a border around it, so you could always stretch the texture a little bit again if you want. I'm just going to leave a slight border on the edge of it, and that's fine. What you can also do is add illuminance to the material. So if you go into the materials properties, you can also turn on the self-illumination channel. Now I have found that the color always comes out this bluey sort of purpley color. I'm just going to set dim glow to maybe CRT television, and the temperature in this case can just be TV screen. And you will notice that if I go to nighttime, it will project light onto the scene, but notice how it's sort of this strange sort of blue color. Now I haven't found a real way to control that color. For some reason it always seems to come out blue. I'm not sure if it's trying to average the color of something inside the video itself, but it always seems to come out this blue color, so it's not quite what you'd want. So you may wish to build like a lighting family to put in front of this instead to get the exact color that you want it to be. But in this case, the last thing we probably need to do is add, in this case, some sound. So what I'm going to do is go back into the Enscape tab, and I'm going to place a sound on a selected face. In this case, I'm going to pick my sound, pick my face, and pick a point on the face. And then I should get a sound object, and I can control how far away from the object the sound projects as well. In this case, 20 is probably a little bit too much. I find that maybe like 10 might be more realistic, and the volume is up to you how loud you want it to play on your computer. I'll make it just a little bit more quiet, but let's go in Enscape and just have a look at the finished product. So unfortunately this actually got copyright striked for using some music that YouTube picked up, so instead I'm just going to replace it with a really good rendition of the music, just to make up for the fact that you can't hear Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirits now. But yeah, one thing that I do pick up on here is that as you get closer and further away, the sound will increase and decrease, and you can modify this property in the properties of the actual sound object as well. If you do find that it's too loud or too quiet, I find it does take a bit of testing just to find the right balance for a volume object. For example, maybe if you have an ambient sound, you might want it to be a bit quieter. If you have a very active sound, for example a boombox, you might want it to be a bit louder. In this case, I found 10 was a little bit too loud, and 3 or 4 was about right for the volume setting. Obviously, it depends on how loud the sound you're using is as well. But yeah, as you get closer and further away, you will be able to hear that difference in the object as well. But yeah, otherwise, I'll go back to the original audio now. In this case, a project where I added quite a few of these to liven up the project. So this was actually a sort of like a backyard house for someone that I was just showing them their design. They've changed it quite a lot since then, so this is a really old version, and I wasn't the architect or anything like that, just sort of visualizing it for them to show them what their experience might be like, and they really loved the result. They really got a good feel for the space and how it might feel to occupy. In this case, there was going to be 3 assets that have movies involved, and some of them are quite fun and creative. So the first one is actually a fish tank. So I went onto YouTube and I found a video of some fish, and I put it in a fish tank. Pretty cool, right? It's a really nice little effect. It's very subtle because obviously when you're not looking directly at it, you don't necessarily notice the fish are moving. But when they realized the fish are moving, they were like, whoa, like that's actually like animated, wow. And if you do put it at night, because the default color is blue, it actually looks quite nice in this case, because it really does look like the fish tank is casting some really nice light. It does get a little bit extreme. You can see some of the surfaces are almost being treated like an ultraviolet light is being placed on them. But also, as well as this, I also did a fireplace. So, you know, just a nice little touch that shows a fire just cackling away. Now, it's actually on a flat surface, but from a distance, you wouldn't really know any better. I mean, it does actually gain a little bit of depth when you're at a distance. So it's also a good way to sort of give the illusion of depth. Even the fish tank, it looks like it's got depth, but when you get right up to it, it's just a video on a surface, essentially. I've got a little bit of glass in front of it just to make it look like it's a tank. And the last thing I did was we had a home theater. So in this case, I put a movie on the home theater. This is actually a really good scene from a movie called Taken, where he uses about 20 jump takes in order to get over a fence. Just a nice, silly little video. So I decided to put that action-packed sequence on the screen. But there we go. So that's pretty much how you can do video textures in Enscape and add a bit of sound to them as well. So I hope that this is a helpful technique that shows you some methods that you can give to give your scene a bit more life and action. So there we go, just a new technique you can use if you're using Enscape, and if you're not actually using Enscape right now, or you haven't used it before and you're a Revit user, I highly recommend you check it out. You can find a link to the website just here that I'll put up on the screen, and otherwise it's just definitely worth trying just to see if it suits you. It's a fairly affordable plugin as well. I wouldn't say it's dirt cheap, but I'd say it's definitely worth the money that you pay for it, and it's not astronomically expensive by any means. Anyway, if you're not already following and subscribing, feel free to do so, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos like this one. Thanks, take care, bye.